welcome to the 90 Day Fiancé Honestly podcast. I'm Bea, and with me as always is Amy.
Hello, everyone.
And together we discuss the 90 Day Fiancé show, dissecting all the drama so you don't have to. This week, we cover part one of the tell-all, and this show that almost always disappoints, falls short of giving us the answers we truly crave, and we deserve, quite frankly, after having watched 16 episodes this season. This show never quite meets my expectations. I think you agree, right, Amy?
Completely.
Awesome. So let's get started with a full 13 minutes of filler while the cast hangs around chatting, waiting to actually get into the stage and for Sean to begin the interviews. Now, I find it always a bit frustrating to have so much junk at the opening of the show. I'd love it if they could simply go straight into it rather than wasting these precious 13 minutes showing us the cast arrive to the studio.
Yeah, that was a bit excessive.
Do you get the feeling that the production staff times the cast's arrival so with the moments that they're sitting in the green room talking about that person?
I think they try to, because it's difficult to coordinate with all the traffic from throughout New York. So they do their best to make sure that people show up on time long enough to, as we saw, allow them to start snarking about one another just for someone to walk right in.
Right. It's so perfectly timed. The moment they're talking about so-and-so walks in. The moment they're talking about the next person, that person walks in. So it felt kind of contrived to me that they were being so obviously set up in the green room for those moments.
I wouldn't be surprised if they held them outside of the green room just to wait for that opportunity to send them into the wolves.
So sneaky. One more thing I found really annoying about the show, we have to have one more scene of David arriving and the sound completely disappearing from our screens. I mean, we get it. Why the producers feel it's necessary to do this audio trick every time to remind us that he's deaf, I don't understand. We know.
It makes me question my own hearing. Because when it goes out, I'm like, was that me? And then I'll snap beside my ears to make sure that my hearing is still intact.
Oh my gosh.
And then it comes right back in. Okay, it's not me. Okay, that's good.
It just seems like such a kind of sophomoric video trick.
Mm-hmm.
I get a bit annoyed. All right, so the biggest surprise that they deliver for us in the first few moments of the show is that Jasmine is there in person. Now, this isn't actually a surprise because we've seen her in the previews. We know she was on stage. So why are they giving us this completely unnecessary moment? I don't know.
Probably just to surprise the other cast members, because you can see that when she walks in, some of them are biting their tongues.
Yeah, good point. I hadn't thought of that. Because they wouldn't know what we know, would they?
Mm-hmm.
Live studio audience for the first time ever. I felt so sorry for the poor sods. How many hours do they have to sit there for? It's basically a whole day, I think.
And what is the purpose of them having a live studio audience if they're not going to open it up like the Teen Mom tell-alls and open the floor to questions from the audience? Because obviously we know that they're not going to answer the questions that we want to ask anyway. Obviously,
Right.
because Sean's not asking them. And every time it seems as though we're getting somewhere, Sean pipes up with, well, there's a lot to unpack there. Let's move on.
I know she has these ridiculous statements. There's a lot to dig into there. And then she never gets her shovel out.
Ever. No.
Ever. I'm waiting and waiting. And these moments never happen. And often the cast actually takes over the interviewing process and asks the questions that we want to know. And then Sean stops them. So, yes, I agree. The format is a little bit lacking. And Sean decides to start off with Gino and Jasmine as the first couple that we actually have spent any significant time with. She asks about the visa problems that we saw Jasmine having the last time we left, and we learned nothing new. There was really no resolution. All we know is that she's there, so it worked out. And then one thing that I noticed in particular was that Jasmine really seemed to be eating up the attention of the audience and Sean. She's hamming it up for the camera. She's being overly theatrical in her responses and in her movements, her expressions. And of course, she's doing that awful thing where she's pausing in all the right places to give the most dramatic effect to her revelations.
Well, she is an actress, right? So
yeah.
she has to bask in the glory of the attention that she gets because now she lives in Michigan where she is no one and no one cares that she's an overly done, fakely beautiful woman.
Yes, I suppose that is true. And a former teacher as well. Wonder if she'll ever take that up again. Somehow I think not.
I highly doubt that.
Yeah. So Jasmine's first revelation is that she has been talking to Dane. Of course, we knew this already, but that she's been talking to Dane specifically about her sex life with Gino. Any thoughts on this?
Well, I think we all know how awful her sex life is with Gino, and how much we would like to know more about her sex life with Dane. I think I would just like to know about Dane's sex life and not so much about hers with him. Let's just remove her from the conversation entirely and focus on what it would be like to discuss it with him. That's what I would like to talk about.
That's a happy thought. I really prefer that. I mean, even if we have to think about it from an outside perspective of Jasmine having sex with somebody, I'd really rather it was Dane than Gino.
I would never expose my eyeballs or ear holes to anything involving Jasmine and Gino's sex life again. I think we have already drawn that line, and that yellow was defined as being yellow. So I'm not even approaching it with caution. It's just I'm not going there.
Okay, let's not go there. Let's go to the second revelation that Jasmine makes, which is that she had a dinner date on Valentine's Day to say goodbye to Dane. Any thoughts on that?
I think that had there not been so much deceit regarding her relationship with Dane to begin with, I don't think it would be as big of a deal as what it was. But because she wasn't honest with Gino about Dane from the very beginning, his existence, him living in the apartment, her hanging out with him, her making a sex video with him a month before Gino comes to visit, there's way too, like, the trust has been completely broken for Gino. There's no way he's ever going to be able to trust that she can hang out with him and not have sex with him, let alone record another sex tape. Had she played her cards differently, I think Gino would have been a lot more accepting of it. But as we've seen throughout their entire relationship, obviously she hides what she doesn't want to give him a reason to react to. Did that even make any sense?
I think so. I get you.
You know what I'm saying. So had she just been upfront from the beginning, it wouldn't have been an issue, but here we are.
But her claim to Gino at the studio is that she has always been honest with him. But I think that she's just kind of walking a very thin line there because, yes, she is telling him the truth. However, she did not tell him the truth, as you said, quite some time ago when it was actually relevant, when it could have perhaps softened the blow to Gino of all of these facts coming to light. So her saying, I'm being honest, Gino, I'm telling you the truth, I've always been honest, it's really a double talk, isn't it?
It is, because she's been lying by omission. Just because you tell them the truth, but you only give them part truth, does not mean that you're being completely honest. You're withholding some information that will change their perspective or outlook on the entire situation. So now you're manipulating the amount of information that you're giving them, or that Jasmine's giving Gino, in order to manipulate his response to ensure that they're not going to blow up. He's not going to blow up at her. And obviously, it blew up in her face anyway, so she should have just been honest from the very beginning.
But I found that the cast seemed to be more offended by what she was revealing than Gino did. They showed us Gino and Jasmine behind the scenes talking this out, And she actually was quite adept in this discussion/argument where she turned things around on Gino and she made him the person who was in the wrong by saying that he was being so judgmental and he had to stand by her side, which she felt he wasn't doing. And then she goes on to say, I'm just going to be myself, so you have to deal with it. She casts all of that guilt and shame onto him and makes him responsible for her actions, in effect. Which is kind of like a cowardly way to go.
And it's also gaslighting. He can't have his feelings about certain things because she wants him to be something else. She doesn't get to have it both ways. You either get to be with a man who has his own brain or you don't. She can't have it both. Gino is not both.
No.
Gino's barely one. So she's got to work within the confines of what she's got.
And maybe it's easier to deal with Gino because of the lack of brain cells. So she really doesn't have to fight that hard.
And maybe that's his way of dealing with her, is like we've seen before with their massive blow-ups, but perhaps because she just got there a couple days ago, he's exhausted. He hasn't slept in days. He's been too busy cleaning his non-hoarder apartment and trying to make sure that everything's right for her to get here. And then now that she is here, has she let him sleep in any capacity? Is she constantly fawning over him? Is she trying to get him to have sex with her all the time? The guy probably hasn't slept since before she's arrived. He's probably just exhausted. So I wouldn't be surprised if they had a big breakup after this, but we're not going to get to see that.
No, we're not. Sounds like you're on Team Gino this episode.
I'm just team anti-Jasmine.
Fair enough. Okay, so let's move on to the third revelation, which is probably the most explosive, which is that she made a sex tape with Dane, which she still has. What kind of a person keeps a sex tape with a different partner from the one that you are currently engaged to?
And after everything that they've gone through since we met them from the very beginning, everything that's happened, why would she think that that's even remotely a good idea? Not just keeping onto it, but making it to begin with. And I'd also like to know that timeline, because they said Gino arrived a month later. So were they exclusive previously? Did she cheat on him? Well, even Gino was saying in the recording that he wants to see the video, but he really just wants to see the date stamp of it to make sure. And I think that's I'm trying to keep this PG, but it wouldn't surprise me if he was the kind of person that liked to watch.
Oh my God. Yeah, I was thinking more along the lines of he wants to compare styles or see how Jasmine responded to somebody else other than him, since he seems fairly insecure about his prowess in the bedroom.
I have some things to say and I have some things to not say. I think so. Maybe he wouldn't like to watch. He might, or maybe he just wants to see it so he can fuel more of that inner anger towards her, because I feel like they do get their jollies off on their fights. But I don't. Maybe he wants to see the video because he also wants to see Dane.
That is a very interesting possibility. We will have to think about that one. In the meantime, let's go to Dempsey and Statler. And the first revelation that Statler makes is that she pooped in the front yard of Dempsey's home. A totally unnecessary, gratuitous scene that we really didn't need to see. But at least it answers the question of where did they go to the bathroom? Because I was asking myself that when I found out in that episode where they first went to Dempsey's caravan and she showed Statler the bathroom and said, there's no actual connection to the toilet, so you can't really use it. because Dempsey said to Statler when the moment was upon her, "Take your shovel and go outside." So that's what they're doing in the English countryside, which I had not even remotely considered. Where's your outhouse? Where's your, I don't know, bucket? Something?
I thought Dempsey said that there was a building across the road that she could use. So I wonder if if she wasn't given enough warning, and that's why Dempsey was practically throwing the garden tools at her.
But why would she then say to her, "Take your shovel and go outside"? Like, it's almost as if, okay, anytime you need to go, and maybe the building is closed at night, so they can't use the toilet at nighttime. They can use it during the day. But the shovel thing, the shovel line made me think, okay, so that is the standard procedure. And she's just reminding Statler of what she has to do to save her from going in the toilet, which is not actually a functioning toilet. Such a horrible scene. Like, why did we need to be exposed to that?
It was so unnecessary. I'm not entirely sure what production was trying to do at that point. I don't think we've ever seen anything like that on the show before, and we don't need it.
No, we don't need it. But remarkably, Statler did not seem in the slightest bit embarrassed by it. I would have been crawling under the sofa trying to get away if that were me.
I don't know if Statler's capable of feeling embarrassed based on all the things that she's spoken about in such vast detail. All these things that we don't need to know. The
True
oversharing.
Oversharing is her middle name, and so perhaps pooping in plain sight of the cameras is just another feather in her cap, something she can tell a funny story about to perfect strangers the next time she's in a pub somewhere. Yeah.
That would not be a funny story that I would be willing to listen to over a pint.
No, I think I'd make an excuse and leave very quickly.
Mm-hmm.
So their update is that they're not going to live together. They're going to be going caravanning all over Europe together. So Dempsey is selling all of her possessions, and Statler is putting hers in storage. And at this point, I just went a little bit of an unequal balance here. Why isn't Statler also selling her stuff? And did Dempsey sell her home? Did she sell the caravan in the field? Why didn't they answer those questions?
Because Sean doesn't want to ask the questions.
Anyway, Statler makes this statement about the fact that she's going to be the breadwinner for the first couple of months. Did you see Dempsey's face when she said that?
Dempsey also had a very curious look on her face when Statler said that she wanted to have a partner who was also financially responsible.
Independent.
Yes, independent. There we go. The look on her face, venom.
Absolutely. They definitely have not talked about this before. And when Statler said she's going to be the breadwinner, Dempsey's eyes went all narrow. She squinted and she just looked completely perplexed. It was obviously new information to her, and she was not happy about Statler revealing this.
And that's when Sean should have piped up and said, "Oh, Dempsey, I see you have a look on your face. Do you want to tell us what you're thinking?" But no, she did not. So we also don't know what that look was like.
No,
what it meant.
Yeah, we just moved on to the next thing about the financially independent statement, which is another one where they clearly haven't talked about it. Statler just says whatever she's thinking without considering how Dempsey might feel about it, and Dempsey gets left in the lurch.
That seems to be an ongoing theme of their relationship. Everything is about Statler. Everything is about keeping her happy. And poor Dempsey is just along for the ride. Yeah, she's the supporting character in Statler's movie because obviously she is the main character.
Dempsey's a sidekick.
Mm-hmm.
That's so sad. Okay, nevertheless, we go on to see another completely unnecessary and gratuitous scene, which is the saging of Statler's vagina. Thank you very much, production team. Showed me that Dempsey is a little bit loony. She thinks a bit of smoke that she wafts around the general area of Statler's nether regions is going to cleanse her. And then we see the egg segments. Why do we need to see this? Why do they have to film this?
I'm not sure what the purpose of that was either. It was too much with very little information supporting the purpose. It just seemed so very out of place and uncomfortable just to watch.
But it played really well into Statler's desire to have all of her sexual exploits on full view for the public.
That's true. I hadn't thought about that.
So I think she was enjoying that moment. She did seem to be having a good chuckle over it. But as somebody watching this episode, I just was like, please, can I close my eyes for the next few minutes? Can you go to a commercial break just to give me a bit of relief from this nonsense?
It was one of those things where I really wanted to fast forward, but I also wanted to watch to see what was happening. But they didn't give too much information at all. And it was a Kegel ball. Is that some sort of cleansing Kegel ball? Does it also contain sage? There was no explanation, so I don't know what the point of that was. What was the intent of the production team by showing that?
Titillation.
Statler probably slipped him 100.
Oh my God. That was pure titillation. So, as if that wasn't bad enough, then after this moment, we get some more details into Statler's sexual escapades, which includes being intimate in a church during service. And Nicola, in this moment, of course, takes center stage, turns into the voice of God, and judges Statler as a big sinner, someone who should be asking for forgiveness, blah, blah, blah. No surprise there.
Now that sounds like my childhood growing up in a Catholic school. I don't need that. It doesn't matter what you say. You're going to feel the wrath of God. You can't do anything right. And sure, having sex in a church, especially during Mass, is obviously frowned upon. Statler was the first to admit, it was years ago, it wasn't her best moment, and she was drunk. So she talks about it, which makes me question whether or not she actually feels any kind of remorse about doing it. But at least she didn't do it this season.
Oh my God. Save us. Yeah, she definitely didn't show any remorse. She seemed to enjoy the spotlight at that moment as usual. She was kind of laughing about it, blushing a little bit. Didn't seem to be excusing herself except for saying that she was in her early 20s, whatever that means. It's so disrespectful. Like, I'm not a religious person, but I do enjoy a nice building, even if it is built for the purpose of worshiping some kind of god. Why would you go there and do that while there are people who are worshiping? It just, really, really ick. And I think it shows a lot of who Statler is, that she doesn't give a crap about a very serious moment like a church service.
No, I agree. As I said, it's, Statler's the main character in her movie, and she doesn't care how much it's going to impact anyone else.
Yeah. So now we get to a big moment. It's our very first unnecessary guest.
Oh, unnecessary guest.
So I'm going to call these UGs from now on.
Okay.
Our first UG is Statler's friend, Natalie. Natalie confirms that Statler moves quickly in relationships. Wow, we didn't know that was coming. And she drops a bomb that she doesn't think that Dempsey is special, which I assume means that she just thinks that this is another fling for Statler. What was your interpretation?
The same. She's nothing special in comparison to everything else or every other relationship Statler's ever been in. This isn't any different.
And this is where things got interesting. Dempsey dismisses the opinion of Natalie, and we start a kind of a mini fight between her and Natalie, in which Statler is actually aligning herself and showing more loyalty to Natalie than Dempsey. Did you
I noticed that
To
too.
that? Yeah.
Yeah.
That was really awkward. And then Statler starts to talk about the fact that they have communication issues and they should go to therapy. Drastic measures. I hadn't seen this coming.
You'd figure that the therapy would come before them traveling all over the countryside in a caravan for however long. But instead they want to do it like during. When are they going to have time to do this before their big adventure?
No clue, because as Statler said, she's going to England in 2 weeks after this tell-all to start a caravan trip. So how on earth could they have any time in there to do any kind of significant counseling? She said they're reading books and they're working on things with the books. Okay, so they're sort of kind of maybe getting help, but probably not.
But reading the books doesn't mean that you're actually doing any of the activities. There's no check and balances. There's no professional to correct the behaviors and or call you out on anything. It's just going to be Statler against Dempsey against Dempsey against Statler and Statler against Statler.
Wow, that's not a happy prospect. And then add into that the fact that they're going to be in this teeny tiny little space for however many months they decide to do this caravanning journey for. I think it's going to lead to some huge problems.
I think so too. And what's the difference between them living in a caravan versus driving one around?
I don't get it. I really don't understand. This is just so bizarre. Like, first of all, it's unequal in that Dempsey's selling all of her things. Statler is not. They're moving from a small semi-functional house to a tiny semi-functional home. How do you think that this is really going to help you? And if during this moment you recognize the fact that I need therapy, I need to get some counseling to help me with my communication issues with my partner, but you're just reading books, I just hope that they have some plan. Maybe they can get some online therapy while they're doing this caravan tour. Stop once a week and see Dr. So-and-so.
I think you're really giving them way too much credit.
I'm just trying to be optimistic, but I don't see this going well. I don't see this trip ending in love and kisses and happy times.
I don't see it either.
Except that we do find out that on the kids' issue, they are both now on the same page, which is quite the turn of events.
Well, now they've both decided that they're unsure, which it's just so dramatic because we saw in the last episode or the episode before where they had that big blowout because, now Dempsey wants to have a baby and that's her non-negotiable. It kind of seems as though that caravan trip is almost like having a baby. It will make us closer. It'll fix our relationship. Let's just travel around the countryside. But this is the only way that Statler can get her all to herself with the commitment of traveling around because Dempsey can't just pack up and leave.
You're so right. She can't leave. She has nothing anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And there's no other person involved, so she gets all of the attention and affection. Wow.
Exactly. Which is obviously what she was worried about with having a baby because they have a baby and now Dempsey's going to be focused on the baby, which Statler can't have because then she's not the main character.
Yeah. Oh, Dempsey. My heart goes out to her.
Get out now.
So Natalie cries, talking about how great a person Statler is, and she's clearly enjoyed her few minutes of fame. And then thankfully we move on. And we move on to Meisha and Nicola, who haven't seen each other for a year. That was a really surprising thing for me to hear.
Well, I think that gives us a little bit of a timeline that we've been trying to figure out for so long, is how long ago did they stop filming? Where are we at now? So it has been a year. So that's interesting.
It is. We don't know that it's been a year for every couple, but at least it gives us a framework. So I would say anywhere between like a year to 6 months is when the filming might have stopped.
I think that sounds
about right.
6
months is probably really conservative. It's probably more like 8 months.
Mm-hmm.
But in any case, so Nicola is coming to the U.S. in a week's time. Woohoo!
But did you note that they didn't indicate how long he was staying for?
Yeah, they didn't say that. Instead, what they did was they gave us that stupid runaround. Like, first, Meisha says, we're still waiting for the church to decide if we can get our annulment. But this is a complete red herring because she already knows what the status is. And then they do this stupid thing where they keep the audience guessing. They send us to commercials. She says a lot of blah, 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 keeping us on the hook for as long as possible before she finally says, it's been granted. The Judiciary Committee or whatever it is, the bunch of old white church guys has said it's okay, she can marry somebody else at last. But my question at this point, which Sean did not ask, was if they know that the annulment has now been granted, why don't they turn this trip when he comes to the U.S. into a marriage trip, a wedding trip? Why don't they get married when he comes? It would make it so much easier. They wouldn't be living in sin anymore, so he doesn't have to feel like his church Jesus website people are going to be judging him. They can actually start enjoying themselves physically, and it's probably faster or easier for them once he returns back to Israel for them to apply for a spousal visa for him to come back rather than a K-1. So why didn't anybody follow up on this?
That's a good question. I did notice that there were no actual discussions about wedding plans. So why was this some long, drawn-out piece of fact when really it doesn't mean anything at this point? Sure, you passed the hurdle, but everyone's trying to pass hurdles. But yours is a big one. So why don't you utilize this opportunity that's been given to you? But instead, they just beat around the bush about everything. How long is he staying? When is he going back? When are you getting married? Nobody answers any real questions because what questions were actually asked?
Yeah, I wanted to know why they weren't considering getting married on his visit, especially given what we saw last week, where he was balking at the idea of coming for 2 to 3 months because that would just look so bad. It would be living in sin, opening the door to the devil, I think was the quote. So if that is the real issue for Nicola, then why do you not simply spend the first 2 weeks getting ready for the wedding and then have the wedding, after which you can live together and spend the full 3 months without the slightest bit of worry about being considered to be living in sin. I just don't get it. To me, there's something missing.
My first thought is he doesn't want to get married on this trip. He specifically doesn't want to get married on this trip because he doesn't want it to look like he's just getting married so he can have sex. So he wants to be as patient and elongate this process as much as possible to appease his followers or listeners or whatever. Look, I am a God-fearing man. I did not have sex on this trip. We planned it. Look at me. I'm still not having sex. Look at me. I'm going back to Israel. We're applying for the K-1 visa. Look at me. I'm still not having sex. And then they get married, and then he can actually have sex, and he can be like, oh, look at me. I've done all the right things. You can't judge me because I'm a God-fearing man and I've done everything right. I'm assuming it has something to do with how things look on him, and it really doesn't have anything to do with Meisha or the States or anything, just about appearances.
For sure. He really is completely paralyzed by his Jesus website people, and he won't move without being absolutely sure that they will approve of what he's doing. Which is crazy because then that means that Meisha comes second or third to whatever else is on. I mean, obviously he would be at the top, and maybe God at the top, and then the Jesus flock, and then Meisha somewhere down the line. Kind of sad.
She's definitely not at the top, and that's been quite obvious throughout this entire season. So if she's surprised by that, that's very sad for her.
It is. I was surprised to learn that Viagra is a sin. Did you know this?
She said something about chemicals being in sin, and yet she's got a face full of Botox and a mouth full of filler. So I'm not
Oh,
sure where she gets off saying that.
no, Amy, that has nothing to do with anything. That's her body, and she's allowed. No, yeah, she said that man-made chemicals were not allowed for I don't know what reason, but to me, this seems like another reason not to be Catholic. And then I started thinking this morning, does that mean that if you're Catholic and you have erectile dysfunction, that basically you have to be satisfied with a life of not having intimate relations with your husband or wife? I guess it would be wife because it's the husband who does have the erectile dysfunction. So both of you, you'd have to be satisfied with no sex because the church deems it inappropriate to take these man-made chemicals. And you also would then not be making any new Catholics for the church, which seems very short-sighted because don't they want to produce more people who are raised in the Catholic Church to increase their flock? Not thinking well.
In theory, but let's also look at their ages again. Pretty sure we've decided that 90% of the people on the show are 43. So she's
Yes.
43.
Yes.
And if he starts having sex now, the likelihood of her getting pregnant, just like Violet, is very, very low. So I don't think whether or not he uses a blue pill even matters. Though I wonder if you are a virgin and you need a little blue pill already, you're missing out.
Well,
Like what?
I
Sorry,
was
go
just
ahead.
thinking about it in more general terms, not specifically them or anybody who is 43. Just that this information that Viagra is a sin. To me, I started thinking about it and wondering, okay, so there's a vast population, and certain numbers of people have erectile dysfunction. They are not necessarily 43 or older. They can be younger. Within the years that you would be expecting them to have offspring. And yet the church says, oh no, you can't use this. But that would be a means to procreate, which is just weird because isn't the Catholic Church all about procreation? It wasn't until very recently that we had the news that condoms were now okay to use. Thank God.
Yeah, they don't support birth control because procreation is God's will.
Mm-hmm.
Though I'm now that we're talking about it, it does make it seem strange that the little blue pills would be um quote unquote illegal because yeah, you'd figure you'd want to procreate as much as humanly possible. But
Exactly.
I also wonder if the little blue pills are seen as sinful because there's so much connotation with pleasure to it.
That's a good angle. Maybe that's where their logic comes from.
It may encourage you to sin more because now you have the effects of the little blue pill for 4 hours.
Mm-hmm. Good point. Okay, let's move on because I don't think we should really spend too long in Christian or Catholic doctrine. We have our second UG. Actually, it's UGs because Misha's daughters come on stage and they're lovely and they try to be tactful. And in this moment, I have to hand it to Sean. She's actually asking some good questions. The daughters have very real concerns about Nicola living in their home. And Misha starts getting quite emotional over this, probably because she knows it's true and that Nicola and her daughters will butt heads. But Nicola is walking a fine line and also trying not to be too firm when talking about parenting the daughters. And he says that Misha is the boss, that he's not going to make any decisions, that they are her responsibility to parent. But then he says he trusts that Misha has the right discernment, interesting choice of words, to do the right thing. And then he doubles down a little bit later and he says the man is the head of the household and the woman has to follow him. So basically, he just completely undermined all of Misha's authority. What did you think about that?
I thought it was it was very telling that he would say the first part, oh, I trust Meisha. It's Meisha's house. It's her kids. She gets to be the authoritarian. And then for him to say, no, it's my house. And he also, like, he doesn't say what happens if he disagrees with her approach to discipline.
That's implicit. It's implicit. The man is the head of, he said, the man is the head of the household. Woman has to follow the man. That is in the Bible.
Which worries me for her kids.
Yeah.
I feel like he's being just calculated enough where he doesn't think that people are picking up on all the little nuances that we are. So he's just trying to be nice enough so he can get there and then just take over everything and be the patriarch.
Yeah, he's definitely wants to be the patriarch, but I think that there was something in the way that he was saying Meisha has authority over her daughter, so he's not going to interfere with that. But then as we learn more, as he speaks more, he undoes all of that logic and comes down to the bare bones, which is man equals head of household, woman equals follow man. So even though he says, oh, Meisha, you discipline your kids how you want, I think it'll come to a point where he sees something that he considers to be so ungodly or such a big sin with regards to the daughters that he tells Meisha and applies so much pressure to her that she feels compelled to then change something in her daughters, which will not end well, I fear.
I can definitely see that. I feel like at this point, Meisha's just doing everything she can to appease him, just to get him over here, because, that's a long time to spend with someone just for it to fail. But I think she owes it to her kids to ensure that they're safe. Because even if, like, what happens if she doesn't discipline them in a way that he agrees with and she leaves the house? Is he going to take it? Is he going to take it upon himself to discipline her kids on his own while she's gone?
Oh, God.
That's what I would be afraid of. And I think that that's something that she also needs to be afraid of.
Absolutely. I'm pretty sure that she's considered all of these angles. I mean, she was pretty emotional about it, which suggested that she had thought about it, that it was something that worried her and caused her anxiety, and that she didn't want to feel any kind of rift between these two groups of people that she loves very much. But we were treated to a recap of some really prime Nicola moments where they showed him in the hotel room with her, where they were kind of arguing, and he said to her, "You're cute when you're mute," which I found absolutely disgusting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't. No, I tried to wipe that out of my head, but I did get a good chuckle about the refresher of how incredibly mechanical he was about the mud thing and bringing up the whole spackling thing again. And she's like, do you want to try that again in a more sensual way? And he's like, no, you're already I got you in all the places you need to be. Okay.
So clueless. I love it. The daughters see that there is a potential problem in the relationship between Nicola and Meisha, and they don't want her mother to be silenced or dismissed. But good luck with that is all I can say. I love it when the daughters laughed when Nicola was talking about women and man's traditional roles according to the church. That just encouraged me a little bit. If they are so firm already in their beliefs that this is wrong, this is outdated, it's the 2023 and it's not the year zero, we can't follow the Bible's rules exactly to the letter because it's a different world that we live in now. I just found that encouraging. However, Amanda pipes up and agrees with Nicola that the man is the head of the household and the woman has to follow. Ick.
Well, isn't that rich coming from her?
Yeah. She had some very interesting opinions on this tell-all, but we're going to get to her next week because we didn't really get to delve into anything much about her and Razvan. All right, let's move on to Riley and Violet. So the first question they're asked is whether or not they're together, and it's a solid no. So that's a positive outcome.
Oh, what a surprise. I was so very shocked when they said that. I really wasn't sure
Did you
how it
fall
was
off
going
your seat, Amy?
I felt like I had to call my mom.
Violet says that she's going to share the truth that everyone doesn't know rather than speak ill of Riley. And I somehow thought that these two statements were going to turn out to be one and the same. I don't think she distinguishes between the two.
No, I don't think so either. It seems as though she set it up as I'm not going to disparage Riley, and then proceeds to poop all over him.
In the name of truth.
Yes, not literally.
Mm-hmm. So what did you think of Riley's completely, totally normal hiring of a private investigator?
I don't think that it was fair for him to say that it's very common in America for people to do things like that. I'm not an American, but I'm pretty sure that, Americans are fairly rational and reasonable human beings like us Canadians here, and it's not commonplace here. But I can understand why he would want to do something like that if he was making such a big commitment, but he was only going to visit. Why not suss it
Exactly.
out while you're there?
Yeah.
Especially because he hasn't sent thousands and thousands of dollars over there. What's he missing out on? What does he have to lose? Why hire? Because PIs aren't cheap. So what was the point of having that initial consult for
Yeah,
what?
exactly. Like you can do enough Google searching on your own to find out the basics. And we already know that he was behind the scenes investigating on his own, if you will, to see if she was still on the dating apps. And like you said, he was only going over to Vietnam to meet her, not to get engaged, not to be in a very serious relationship. Their dynamic was completely different than anyone else's. And it seemed like it was just a question of, I'm going to go over there and suss it out, see if we're compatible, because I don't really know yet. So why would you need to go to the lengths of hiring a private investigator for this?
I wonder if he had someone whispering in his ear that there was something up and he needed to look into it. Like an
That could be.
internal or external person that was encouraging it because they saw everything that was going wrong and wanted to open his eyes before he even went over. And look at the disaster that we've walked into now.
Do you think that person was Tiffany?
Yes, I do.
Okay, she is our UG number 3. Why didn't you delete the app? Is what I wrote in my notes. We keep rehashing that. Like, who cares? Who cares if you deleted the app, if you didn't delete the app, if you were still on there, if you weren't? The point is, she can make her own choices. He can as well. And they were not in a committed relationship. They were not engaged. So what is the big deal over this stupid deletion of the app issue?
I don't know. And I also don't know why Violet keeps lying about it. Oh, I forgot my password. Well, what does that have to do with anything? Just delete the app.
Yeah. The wishy-washy back and forth, I did this, no, I did that, stuff from Violet, it's not encouraging in the least for instilling our faith in her trustworthiness. Anyway, we have a bit of time with Tiffany. She doesn't really add that much value to the conversation at all, as most UGs. And Riley, I found, was acting very self-righteous. Did you see that? We already knew that Violet was lying, but it seemed like he felt like he had the moral high ground and he had to prove it somehow. He really had to shove it in our faces that he was the one to trust in this moment, which he did not. But
I feel like that's been that's the angle that he's been trying to achieve throughout this entire season.
yeah.
Whenever they have a fight, when they have like those little interviews, he always tries to make it seem as though she's more insane than she is, and he's done nothing wrong, and it's the same thing here. And I think that he felt even more empowered because he had Tiffany there for support, and maybe he knew that Sean wasn't going to be asking any useful questions, so he felt supported in his self-righteous position.
Yeah. The only person who did ask any good questions in Riley's segment was Jasmine. She said, you don't trust this woman, and yet you chose to have unprotected sex with her, which
I thought was very poignant coming from her.
Yeah. Spot on, Jasmine. Great question. She could take over the interview from this point, as far as I was concerned.
As much as I don't want to hear her open her mouth ever again, she did ask better questions than Sean did throughout the entire, since she's existed as a tell-all host.
Okay, Riley's statement, science versus miracles. What on earth does this mean? What is he talking about?
I'm assuming he means science, meaning that he has a very low sperm count and he can't get anyone pregnant, and miracles, because it's a low chance, then it does happen, then it's considered a miracle, and science doesn't matter. He doesn't make any sense.
He does not make any sense. So Riley thinks that Violet's pregnancy was a lie in order to keep Riley. What?
Yeah, he's out to lunch. We've seen her body language with him. Obviously, it's confusing because they do admit that they had sex. Still not sure what her angle is on that. But the fact that he wants to take this position that she wants to trap him, to keep him, is so ludicrous. If she was going to do that, why wouldn't she do that from the very beginning? Why wouldn't she play her cards differently to trap him down sooner? Why would she wait until after this blow up, him leaving, the breakup, the blocking, and then to come running back now? It doesn't make any sense.
If she wanted to keep him, all she had to do was be nice to him. She didn't have to get pregnant or fake get pregnant.
I wonder if it's outside of her capacity to do so. She just doesn't seem like a nice person at all.
Yet she has friends.
Yeah. I would assume that they're all like her. Because remember, I think it was one of the first couple episodes where they went in to get him that outfit made, and that traditional, I'm not sure what to call it. And her and her friend are laughing about he's fat and stupid. Maybe because they're all like her.
Yeah. Yeah, that seems to be a cultural thing because Riley alluded to that a few times at the beginning.
I think Violet said that it was her culture. It was the Vietnamese. That's how we talk about people, though I've seen discussions online where Vietnamese people have piped up and said, absolutely not. That's not our culture.
Okay. All right. So, of course, by the end of this episode, we still don't know whether the child is Riley's, whether or not it exists at all. We know really nothing more than when we started the episode. But my question was the timeline. Why didn't anybody ask about this? Because if it's been a year since Meisha has come back from Israel, doesn't it make sense that it's about that time for Riley and Violet? And if so, and remember, she contacted him 2 months after he got back. By the time she was actually being nice to him, not before when she was being mean.
Yeah, it was something like that.
To say that she was pregnant. So we've already had a bit of time for that to happen. And then how much time has elapsed since then? She is, if she was pregnant, is pregnant. She would be definitely showing by now, if not already have a baby in her arms. So what the heck is going on?
I still vote for miscarriage. Whether or not the pregnancy was a lie, that's what she's going to spin at the end of this.
But then why would they talk about it as if it's a reality right now that she is pregnant? Because that would be incredibly insensitive and painful for both of them to be pretending that she's pregnant at the moment, but in fact she miscarried some while ago.
That's something I hadn't considered. But it's difficult to be upset about a miscarriage of a baby you never had.
Yes. If the baby never existed at all, that's a different matter. But everybody is acting as if the baby is or was a real thing. So this is why I just find it all very, very sus. And then we end on this note where we find out that Violet is coming to the US. What? And they both seem happy about it. They're both like smiling and yeah, she's coming. She'll be here soon. Yay. What?
Which is so strange because when they first brought up the whole relationship thing and the baby thing, both of them just looked so pissed off.
Yeah.
Like especially Riley with like the way that he was holding his hands and he just looked like he couldn't contain himself. And then we do find out that Violet's coming to the States, which obviously supports one of my very first tidbits since we started recording this podcast, that
Indeed
she was indeed there.
Yay,
so
Amy.
That was very exciting and validating to find out. Because after we saw that she was on the video for the tell-all, I was worried, oh no, was my intel incorrect? No, just had to be patient, which I'm not good at.
Next week, we're going to dig into the remaining couples. We didn't really get to focus on it all this week, including Tyree. Why is he here? There was no relationship. It's been dead in the water from the first episode. His storyline has been dragged out for far too long. I don't want to even talk about him. Thoughts?
There's nothing to talk about.
Yeah.
He got catfished and it was drawn out for entirely too many episodes. And I really don't care who's on the other line. I don't care.
I don't care either. I don't want to listen to this phone call. I don't want to talk about it anymore. Just move on, please. David and Sheila haven't had a chance to talk about their relationship much either. All we know is that David's grown a beard. Otherwise, they seem fairly happy.
And Sheila doesn't like it.
Sheila doesn't like it. No mention of when she's coming or he's going. Perhaps we'll find out next week. Amanda and Razvan. We get an interesting little treat from Razvan when he hints that he and Amanda might not be together anymore because he says, I had to take a step back after she left, which to me is a signal of I'm reconsidering the relationship from start to finish.
I really hope that his answers are going to be as transparent as the shirt that he's wearing.
You loved his shirt, didn't you?
I really did love that shirt. That wasn't really a shirt, but was a shirt. It was enough of a shirt. Just enough of a shirt.
He looked great. he did look really good. But I hope that this little tidbit of information that he gave to us is not going to turn out to be one of those fake outs from the producers. So he'll say, I had to take a step back from the relationship, but in fact, they're still together and going really strong. I hope it is not that way. Oh my God.
Yeah, I really hope that his step back was in order to completely change tracks and run as far away as humanly possible.
We'll see. Christian and Cleo are still together. Huh?
I don't get that either.
Even Sean was surprised. That said a lot.
I wouldn't be surprised if both of them were also surprised. Everyone is surprised that it's still a thing.
Yeah. Anyway, we'll find out next week what's happening with that. But overall, what would you grade the tell-all for this week?
I'm going to give it a 5.
Out of
10.
Okay.
I want to say mostly because Sean didn't ask any questions and we didn't really get any answers. Most of the carriage of the good questions came from the other cast members. I enjoy the other cast members calling each other out, asking questions. but as a host, you're there to kind of corral the discussion, and she did absolutely nothing. I would have rated it lower because we really didn't get any new information. There was nothing discussed, nothing was clarified, and we knew this when we were recording last week that we weren't going to be getting any of the answers that we needed. But because Jasmine didn't cry, I felt the need to give it a 5. So had we had any answers, I would have given it a higher rating, but I couldn't. There was nothing to go off of. It was entertaining enough that I don't seriously regret spending an hour and a half watching it. And I am looking forward to next week, although I'm probably going to be just as disappointed as this week. So yeah, a solid 5. A solid neutral. What about you?
Okay, I gave it a 4. I thought that it was a complete fail on what's going on with the baby issue. They failed on having Dane as a guest appearance.
Oh, he would have been a great UG.
Yeah, he would have been fantastic.
He would have been, what would we call him? An MAG, a much anticipated guest.
A mag. Okay.
Yes.
And also a fail on the really weird and stilted attempts to create tension, like when Meisha was taking forever to say that the annulment had been granted, or when Jasmine said that Dane had proposed that they go to dinner. Like, all of that stuff was just like, we don't need that. We've been watching for 16 episodes. We're with you. We understand what's happening. Please don't play with us anymore. Just tell us what's happening and be real. I don't need any games. So yeah, 4 out of 10.
I'm surprised I was more generous than you. Maybe it was also Razvan's shirt.
Oh, yeah, that might actually sneak up the grade to a 5. I hadn't thought about that. We just didn't spend enough time with him on the screen.
That's true.
I really can't wait for next week to see what's going on between him and Amanda.
I think it's going to be, I hope it's going to be a good episode. All we can do is hope.
Well said. So before we go, I have a special favor to ask if you're enjoying the 90 Day Fiancé Honestly podcast, and that is to please follow our show and take a moment to rate us. These ratings not only make our day, but they help to bring in more listeners, which ensures that we keep delivering a great show every week. Thank you so much for listening, and please tune in again next week when we'll be wrapping up the entire season of 90 Day Fiancé before the 90 days with the Tell-All Part 2. More disappointing half answers are on their way. Yay! See you next week.
And bye, everyone.